السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف خلق الله سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين وصحبه الأخيار المنتجبين وعلى جميع الأنبياء والمرسلين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، يقول الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل اللهم فاطر السماوات والأرض عالم الغيب والشهادة أنت تحكم بين عبادك فيما كانوا فيه يختلفون. Chapter 39, verse 46. Say, O Allah, originator of the heavens and the earth, knower of the seen and the unseen, you judge between your servants regarding their differences. It is narrated that the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam said, وَيْلٌ لِلْمُتَأَلِّينَ مِنْ أُمَّتِي الذين يقولون فلان في الجنة وفلان في النار. Woe to those people of my nation, the people who pledge and promise that so and so is in the paradise and so is in the hellfire. The Prophet is warning these people. We know that many Muslim groups throughout history, they engage in this kind of conduct. A conduct of what? Not just judging individuals, that this individual is certainly in the hellfire. This individual is certainly in Jannah. No, but actually groups, complete groups. This sect of Islam or this denomination or this group of Muslims, they are in nar, they are in hellfire, they're in loss. And some actually had some dared to excommunicate people from the mercy of God. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy will never reach so and so people. Or excommunicate all other Muslims. Anyone who does not say what we say is a kafir, and therefore, there's implications. Some people had the audacity actually to reach this stage. Now, of course, there is an important question that we can ask here. Is there a monopoly over Jannah? Is there a monopoly over paradise? To address this question, I'll mention a few points. Number one, Jannah and Nar, the paradise and the hellfire, are in the hands of God. Are in the hands of God alone, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. Allah alone knows the intentions of people. Allah alone knows whether the truth reached someone truly or not. Allah knows what you know. Allah knows whether you're accepting the truth or rejecting it after knowing it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows the circumstances of people, knows the level of excusability that people might have before Allah. Only He knows. How can you know? When Allah says in the Quran, إِنَّ أَكْرَمَكُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَتْقَاكُمْ, the closest or the most honorable amongst you to God are those who have the best taqwa. Now, taqwa is not something that appears on your face necessarily. Who knows the level of your taqwa except God? Who knows it except God? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows these things. And Allah Himself says in the Quran, chapter 17, verse 15, وَمَا كُنَّا مُعَذِّبِينَ حَتَّى نَبْعَثَ رَسُولًا. And we would never punish a people until we have sent a messenger to warn them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if there is someone or some people who did not receive any messenger, who did not receive any warning, who did not receive any news about the truth, Allah is saying, I would not punish these people. These people have their excuses. وَمَا كُنَّا مُعَذِّبِينَ حَتَّى نَبْعَثَ رَسُولًا. The second point is that there is a difference between deserving the hellfire, deserving the punishment of God, and actually receiving the punishment of God. There's a difference. Now, which one of us deserves to enter Jannah? Huh? saying that, yeah, I deserve, it's a right of me upon God that He takes me to Jannah. Which one of us can claim that? Isn't it with the mercy of God that we all are successful? If we are. Isn't it with His support, with His help? So, if someone deserves to enter the hellfire, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses to pardon her, would she enter the hellfire? She wouldn't. She wouldn't. It is strictly in the hands of Allah and the control of Allah to pardon. And if He chooses to pardon, then that person would not be in the hellfire. How dare you then say that this person is in the hellfire, or this group is in the hellfire? How dare you then judge someone in this way? You're placing yourself in the place of God, وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ, in that sense. Number 3, addressing the point of, is there a monopoly over paradise? Can people really judge that this person is in Jannah and this person is in Nar? Number 3 is that this mentality of judging people, the mentality, yeah? It makes us become people who are obsessed with what? Tracking others' deficiencies. Tracking other people's slips. We would waiting and counting, we would be score pointing against others. If someone does a mistake, look, this person is like this and this and that. So this judgment mentality, this is what it transforms us to be. To be people who are focusing on others, when all the Islamic education focused so much on what? Focus on yourself. Focus on yourself first. Rectify your own deficiencies first. Isn't this what Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib says? In Nahj al-Balagha, in some of his sermons, it is narrated that he said, يَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسِ طُوبَى لِمَنْ شَغَلَهُ عَيْبُهُ عَنْ عُيُوبِ النَّاسِ. Blessed is he who is busier addressing his own defects than chasing the defects of others. That's tuba, that's a successful person, that's a blessed person. Isn't this what Islam is inviting us to do? Focusing on fixing your own deficiencies? Because if we all look out at what we have in our plate, we have a lot, we have enough to pay attention to before we track other people's slips. Number 4 is that this attitude of judging others and saying that this person is in Jannah, this person is in Nar, this person is in the paradise and will be saved, and this person will be in loss and in the hellfire, this kind of attitude and dwelling on this kind of behavior as well, what it could lead us to is that the criteria by which we discriminate between people will become personal. What do I mean? This person I love, he's a good friend of mine, he's in Jannah, because I like him. This friend of mine or this person I have issues with, she wronged me one day. She's not Muslim anymore. Allah knows what is in her heart, and she's definitely in the hellfire. Personal preferences. You become yourself. Your personal preferences, your love or hate towards someone becomes the criteria by which you judge whether this someone is in the hellfire or is in Jannah. And by the way, you don't have to say this. It might be an attitude that you think of. I don't have to come and say that, look, I think that this person is in the hellfire. I don't have to do that. The fact that I have that thought in my mind, or that attitude, or that feeling towards a person, that this person does not deserve God's mercy, this means that you slipped into that hole. And this is a kind of this bias or asabiya that Ahlul Bayt warned us from. In a hadith, it is narrated that Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen said, لَيْسَ مِنَ الْعَصَبِيَّةِ أَنْ يُحِبَّ الْمَرْءُ قَوْمَهُ. It is not bias. It is not counted as bias if you love your family, if you love your people, if you love your tribe, your clan, if you love your nation. That's not bias. That's beautiful. That's natural. Everyone loves his own identity. Everyone loves her own family and her own friends. That's good. That's not bias. Imam continues, وَلَكِنَّ الْعَصَبِيَّةَ أَن تَرَى شِرَارَ قَوْمِكَ خَيْرًا مِنْ خِيَارِ قَوْمٍ آخَرِينَ. Bias is that you see the bad people of your own as better than the good people of others. This is عصبية. No, the criteria by which you judge whether a person is good or not, whether you befriend this person or not, is their adherence to God, is their adherence to God's will. This is the criteria, not your personal God that you might be building inside yourself. And the last point I want to mention about this is that if this mentality of judgment becomes a societal phenomenon, as in it's a pattern in the community, what this might lead to is hypocrisy, in fact. Imagine that there is a community that claims that another community is in the hellfire. This group of the Muslims, they are in the hellfire. This group of the Christians, they are in the hellfire certainly. Imagine, we are a community like this. And then when life happens, and then when you have to collaborate together facing a challenge, and then you say, oh fine, but we have a certain interest here, let's collaborate, it's fine. Yeah, you are in the hellfire, but let's collaborate. Isn't this a form of hypocrisy? If you believe that the other people have no truth whatsoever to stand on and therefore they deserve the hellfire, and then you collaborate with them, is this a good value or is it not? Something to think about. An important hadith to mention here in this context is a hadith that is popular amongst the Muslims, and sometimes it is used to justify this discrimination and this act of judgment. You might have heard of it. A hadith that is attributed to the Holy Prophet that he said, وَإِنَّ أُمَّتِي سَتُفْرَقُ بَعْدِي إِلَى أو على 73 فرقة. My ummah, my nation, after me will split into 73 groups. All of them are in the hellfire and one will be saved. So this is a hadith attributed to the Holy Prophet, and a lot of times it is used by so many groups. And what happened is that almost every sect that believed in this hadith, every Islamic denomination, let me say, that believed in this hadith, what did they claim? That we are the saved people. The Prophet said, one group after me will be saved and everyone else will be in the hellfire, and therefore every group says, who believe in this hadith, that it's us and the others are in the hellfire. And consequently, what are the consequences of this? Is that basically you as a person of faith, you believe that you want to adhere to God's command, you want to adhere to the will of God, you believe that you should not mix with those people, the people of the hellfire. They are in loss, they are astray, you should not mix in any way, because you have completely separate aqeedah, separate fiqh, separate akhlaq, and you don't identify with anything with them. Isn't this what we see sometimes in these days? Do people from the Shia community, for example, do they go to a Sunni mosque? Ask yourself, have you gone to a Sunni mosque? At some point in time, it was normal that Shia scholars would go and study under Sunni scholars. Sunni scholars would go and study under Shia scholars in Shia houses. It was normal. It was the trend, if anything. But now, do we see any Sunni brother coming to a Shia mosque? Do we see our Sunni brothers participating in our commemoration events, Shahada or Wilada? Do we see that? Maybe one reason is that, well, we believe that they are wrong. Everything that they have to say is wrong. There's no righteousness. And I have to protect my iman, and therefore they have nothing to offer me. Everything that they believe in is wrong. It's the fact of the matter, whether we admit it or not. Sometimes we have this attitude that the others have no right or nothing of righteousness whatsoever, and this creates this complete disconnection between communities. Let me mention a few remarks on this hadith attributed to the Holy Prophet. Number one, the apparent meaning of this hadith is in opposition to the Quran. The apparent meaning of the hadith, that there are groups, one group is saved and other groups are in the hellfire. It is in opposition to the apparent meaning of the Quran. Why? The Quran explicitly mentions that salvation on the Day of Judgment, punishment on the Day of Judgment, is dependent on one thing, and that is the individual matter, the individual responsibility. When Allah says in the Quran, وَكُلُّكُمْ آتِيهِ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ فَرْدًا, on the Day of Judgment, everyone will be presented to God as individuals. Not as a group in the sense that this is the identity or the group that you were born in and therefore you would be grouped with them in that sense. Individual responsibility. كُلُّ نَفْسٍ بِمَا كَسَبَتْ رَهِينًا. Individual responsibility. And also, the Quran clarifies very clearly that the principle in judgment is what? Is the deeds. is the actions of the individual, not the group that he was thought to be part of. Someone is born Sunni, therefore khalas, he is Sunni, and we judge him as we judge Sunnis. Someone is born Shia or Christian, that's it, we judge them as we judge the whole group. No, it's the individual responsibility. So we cannot justify, therefore, the destiny of an individual based on what we think the destiny of the group is. And actually, the Prophet ﷺ, it is narrated that in Mina, in a sermon that he delivered in Mina, that's his last Hajj, his first and last Hajj. It means that he's giving a will before he departs. He said, أَيُّهَا النَّاسِ مَا جَاءَكُمْ عَنِّي, whatever comes to you about me, a hadith that I said. Someone tells you I said something. If it is in agreement with the book of God, I said it. But if it is not, if it disagrees with the book of God, I did not say it. Number two, when we talk about group identity or someone belonging to a group, mainly that group is identified by what? By a set of values, principles, ideas, ideologies that unify them or identify them. This is how it is usually. And when someone said that this group is so and so, it means that they have a common set of ideologies, common set of values. So now we think about all the Muslim groups. Do they not have anything in common? Nothing? Do they not all at least say La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi? Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa alihi. Do they not have things in common about Salat, Siyam, Quran, the same book, the same Qibla, all this? So if you want to say that this group of Muslims are in the hellfire, are you saying that they have nothing of truth that could save them? But if they are what they are and they are in the hellfire, how do you acquit yourself then when you have common values and principles with them? So something doesn't make sense there. And still, the main principle applies that I mentioned in the beginning. That is what? Allah said, I would never punish people unless I give them a warning. Unless the truth becomes manifest to them. Unless the truth becomes manifest to them. You can't really judge someone because maybe you did not clarify the truth to him or her. Instead of saying, yeah, they have the truth in their books. You hear that a lot. It's from your books that we prove this and that. Habibi, first, who says that they believe in everything that they have in their books? Do you believe everything that you have in all books of your narrations? Do you not have narrations that you disagree with and you say this is questionable? Why do you accuse the others of the same thing? No, go and debate and dialogue with the others by what they believe, not by what you claim they believe. No manstrawing here. So some, of course, might object and bring, a verse from the Quran saying, and on the Day of Judgment, so Quran 45:28 says in the English, and you will see every faith community on its knees. Every community will be summoned to its record of deeds. So Allah saying, we summon communities. But yes, the answer is in the verse. By the deeds. The verse here is talking about the community level of deeds, because individual level, sometimes we do actions that reflect eventually on the community. So it is by this shared responsibility that we be brought together, by the deeds, by the actions that we've done together, by the conclusions or the results that we have caused. And the last point I want to mention here about this hadith is that if you look at the Muslim hadith sources, you see this hadith with different versions. You see Sunni sources saying what? That the Prophet said that the community, my ummah, will split into 73 groups. One will be saved and the others are in the hellfire, and the one that will be saved is the jama'ah. In the Shi'i sources, you see the hadith saying that people ask the Prophet, and who are these saved ones? And he would say, Ahlu Bayti, what we are today on, and these are the Ahlu Bayti. Okay? Now, I'm not going to go into discussion about the validity of each, whether it's valid or not. What I want to say is, if we have this mentality to claim that, look, we are the saved and everyone else is excluded from the salvation, then where are we heading? Is this really the nation of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat linnas wa'tasimu bihablillahi jami'a. All of you stick to the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala together and do not split apart. Are we not splitting ourselves apart if we have this attitude? We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah, that we may focus more on our own selves and our own deeds instead of judging others and putting ourselves or performing the role of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this sense. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Wal asri innal insana lafi khusr إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم صل على محمد عبدك ورسولك وأمينك وصفيك وحبيبك وخيرتك من خلقك وحافظ سرك ومبلغ رسالاتك. اللهم وصل على علي أمير المؤمنين ووصي رسول رب العالمين، عبدك ووليك وأخي رسولك وحجتك على خلقك وآيتك الكبرى والنبأ العظيم. وصل على الصديقة الكبرى فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. وصل على سبطي الرحمة وإمامي الهدى الحسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة أجمعين. وصل على أئمة المسلمين علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والخلف الهادي المهدي، حججك على عبادك وأمنائك في بلادك، صلاة كثيرة دائمة. عباد الله، أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله والورع عن محارمه. My dear brothers, my dear sisters, the servants of God, I enjoin myself and yourselves to observe taqwa and to stay away from anything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prohibited. I realize I have a short time, inshallah I would keep it short. I'll cut it short. But something that is important to note is that amidst what is happening today in Palestine, again the continuing Israeli atrocities that are happening, amidst all this, we need to make sure that we keep and we channel the negative atmosphere into positivity, into activity. I really have to remind of that. Yes, that we need to be focused on what matters here. We need to continue with the acts of boycotting whatever finances the war machine of Israel. We need to make sure we continue that. We need to make sure that when things calm down, and inshallah when Allah gives the victory of the people of Palestine, and He is giving them the victory, and they will be victorious, and they are now victorious, that when this event or this episode finishes, we don't go back into our previous lifestyle or previous conduct. You know, the very fact that the boycotting is affecting the economy of those who support the Israeli war machine, the fact that there is an impact there, it means that before we might have gotten it wrong. We've been doing something that was not right for some time now. We need to make sure that we don't go back to it. And to ensure that, one of the ways to ensure that is to educate ourselves. This is what we tried to do last week. To educate ourselves, such that when some people come to you and claim that this war or this conflict or this crisis is a Jewish-Muslim problem just because these are Muslims and by the fact that these are Jewish, you can actually look in the eye of that person and say, look, you either are lying or you're misinformed. You can confidently say that. You can actually point to the problem and the origins of the problem. This is what we're trying to do, inshallah. So let me continue reading the article I started with last week, which was published at the United Nations website in 1980, and the title was The Question of Palestine. And last time we talked about this Balfour Declaration that was given in 1917 by the Foreign Secretary of Britain, Lord Balfour, saying or pledging that we will we'll do our best to create a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine, and we will work towards it. Now, following the victory of the Allies in the First World War, what happened is that the people who were subjects of the Ottoman Empire, the Hungarians, what was called the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the German Empire as well, they were now put under what's called the mandate. The mandate of what? Of the Allies, of the Allied powers. So for example, Lebanon and Syria, they were put under the mandate of the French. Yes? Transjordan and Palestine, they were put under the mandate of Britain. Now, Lebanon, Syria, and Jordan, they gained their independence in some years in 1940s after the Second World War. But Palestine suddenly became a scene of conflict. A very violent conflict. So one of the aims of the mandate of these powers over those people was that what? The development of self-governing institutions. That was the claimed aim. However, the British government policy statement, which was known as the Churchill Memorandum of the 1st of July 1922, it subordinated this principle to a secondary principle. So it deactivated the first principle of allowing the nations to do self-government. They said, well, no, we have a primary obligation here. What was that? The obligation of establishing a Jewish national home in Palestine. Now, the later Foreign Secretary of Britain, Lord Curzon, he warned that the term national home in that declaration meant really a Jewish state. And he said, in which the Arabs basically would be second-class citizens. And he declared, I think the entire concept wrong. Now, a later and stronger and more explicit version of the Balfour Declaration came. What was that? And was made part of the British mandate over Palestine. So now the mandate recognized the Zionist organization as this Jewish agency, as they called it, which would help in the establishment of the Jewish national home by organizing large-scale immigration and settlements of the Jews from abroad on the land that the agency has acquired in Palestine. This is where also the problem started to escalate. There was a Paris convention, it was called the Paris Peace Conference in 1919. And these sent a commission to assess the will of the people of Palestine. And they actually called for serious modification of the extreme Zionist program for Palestine of unlimited immigration of Jews, end quote. That's what they recommended. And the commission declared that this program aiming, quote, finally to making Palestine distinctly a Jewish state would be a serious injustice. That was 1919. So the building of this Jewish national home started soon after the end of the First World War. 1920s, before 1920s, after that. 1918 maybe. And the Zionist organization promoted a large-scale Jewish immigration that brought marked changes to the population of Palestine, or the population pattern. And we see that this dramatic increase was primarily due to what? The large numbers of Jews fleeing from the Nazi terror, supported by the Zionist organization. And the Zionist organization, what they did, they also acquired land to settle the Jewish immigrants. And then the Jewish holdings in Palestine, so land, possessions, they more than doubled between 1920 and 1939. 19 years. More than doubled from 2.5% to 5.7% or so. So this tells you about that project, what it was. And later, inshallah, so I'll stop here in the interest of time. Inshallah, I'll continue next week. And you will see, at least this gives you a context of when you see Palestinians rioting or rebelling at that time, what are they objecting to? What are they objecting to? Something that is being made, forced upon them without their will. This is really the essence of the problem. Anyone who tells you religion or race is an origin of the problem, again, tell them you're either lying or you're misinformed, because that's not the truth. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah, that He inform us more and more and He increases us in knowledge such that we are able to make the right decisions, the right judgments on how to behave facing challenges that we are facing in the modern day. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على